faith in the Old Testament, right? The Old Testament sets up for us what this faith looks like. In the Bible, faith is very much related to a covenantal relationship with God. Okay, I'll explain what a covenant is later, but on this point, you see here already is where our English word faith often fails us, because in the Bible, right, faith in the historical books, okay, it's not referring to like just mere historical books. It's referring to historical books in the Bible. Okay, look at this quote: faith in the historical books must be understood as a covenantal concept that describes the dynamic mutual relationship between God and his people, and affirmation not only in words but in words and deeds, and not just any deeds but deeds of Israel's covenant obligation to God, who is faithful and loyal in his covenant with his people Israel. Okay, so okay, you're probably, some of you may be a bit new to the word covenant, but the word covenant basically is talking about a special relationship between a powerful king, an emperor, a lord, okay, but a very powerful king and his subjects, okay, and that subjects may in fact also include lesser kings, all right, less powerful kings. Um, I mean, if you grew up with the Malaysian sejarah textbooks, right? I think you probably remember, last time we had to read a lot of like, Perjanjian, we read about like the Thai king and the Siam. Last time they call it Siam, right? It's always Siam, that powerful country that attacks our, the states like Penang or Kedah and all that, right? Then after losing, then they enter into a Perjanjian where they come under the more powerful king's protection. Obviously, usually the Malaysian states, they are the lesser ones, right? They are not the powerful ones. Yeah, so they enter into a so-called, what we call a treaty, right? A contract with the powerful nation, where the powerful nation, the king, the emperor, gives protection to this state, right? If anyone catches them, the Dailo, the big boss, will come and protect them. But at the same time, in offer for that protection and coming under that powerful king's rule, the lesser states, they will have to offer tributes, right? They will have to offer gifts and basically submit to the powerful king. And that's pretty much what a covenant relationship is like. Okay, it involves a powerful king, a lord. Okay, we call it the covenant lord, and his subjects. And that is what ultimately the relationship between God and his people is like. And here's where you need to think about it, right? Is that really how you think about your Christianity? Do you think of yourself as a subject of a covenant lord, right? A master, a boss, a king whom you must devote your loyalty to, right? Because that's what's involved in it, those perjanjians, those treaties. If you make deals with any other nations, then that treaty is broken, and in fact you're considered to be a traitor, a rebel, and you will be incurring the wrath of the covenant law, right? Do you think of your Christianity like that, or do you think of God merely like someone who is there to help you in your time of needs, right? To answer your prayers, to hear you, to speak to. If you think of God that way, then sadly we have just reduced God down to merely just a counselor, a good friend, maybe even a father, but you see, he's more than just a father. And sadly, honestly, a lot of us treat God like a genie, right? Where instead of rubbing a lamp, instead of rubbing our lamp, our hands like that, our hands go like that, right? And we pray and we make unlimited so-called wishes, and we expect God to fulfill that. And then we get really, really angry at God when he doesn't, and we don't believe in him merely because those prayers are not answered. That's crazy, right? God is the covenant Lord. He's not some genie who must, who is obliged to grant your every wish, or answer your every prayer. And if he does not do so, you question his existence. Who do you think you are, right? And so here's so here's where we get faith all wrong. We think that having powerful faith, having strong faith is believing that God always answers prayer. Whereas faith has to do firstly with understanding that you are a subject of a covenant law, right? It's to relate to God in this relationship. Okay, so we need to realize that what the Bible teaches us in the Old Testament is to teach us to see that faith is not just, a one-time decision to believe, or stepping out of faith, or even emotions, right? Even feeling positive about something. As you see in the quote again, faith in the historical books must be firstly understood as a covenantal concept that describes this dynamic mutual relationship between God and his people, right? So in other words, in the Hebrew, the concept of faith is used in the context of a covenant relationship. And that means, right, that the word believe, right, we often think of a synonym, right, for the word faith. We would usually say, oh, faith is to believe. But actually, you see that if faith needs to be understood in the context of a covenant relationship, that means that the word believe in English is not enough to substitute for the word faith, right? Because again, the problem is our English translation. In the Hebrew, the word faith is emunah, okay? And in English, we translate it as faith. And when we think of the word faith, we usually think of the word belief. But in the original Hebrew, right, that idea of emunah, the Hebrew word for faith, involves more than just belief. That Hebrew idea, faith of faith, there is bigger than just mere belief, because belief is just merely assenting to something that you agree with, right? You believe in facts. But if the Hebrew idea of faith is in the context of a relationship, then like all relationships, right, that naturally also involves certain obligations, as we talked about in a covenant, right? To enter into a relationship with the covenant law requires you to fulfill certain obligations, just like any other relationships. There's responsibilities, right? So just for example, if Jonathan's relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Khan is that he is their son, then he has certain obligations to them, which David Kwok, don't have, right? He has to honor them, take care of them, and I don't, right? Whereas the relationship between me and my wife is that we are married, right? And so that also involves certain obligations as well, right? Like taking care of her, pastoring her, even doing things like I don't like, right? Like chores, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, right, the Hebrew idea of faith involves concepts such as faithfulness, integrity, trust, reliability, loyalty, fear, obedience, covenant, right? And if you think of these English concepts, faithfulness, integrity, trust, reliability, all that, does the word believe replace all that? No, it can't. But belief, like we said, is mere assent. And these words capture better for us the biblical idea of what faith is. You see, it's not just belief and assent, but it involves obligations and duties. It involves obedience. To keep things simple, right? Faith is not just believing, but faith is also faithfulness, right? That's why I asked the question earlier. What's the difference between having faith and being faithful? In the Bible, it's both, right? You need to, of course, trust, but also have faithfulness, have obedience. So Jonathan, for him to so-called have faith in relationship to his parents, he's not mainly called to have faith in his parents. He's got to be faithful as a son, right? And I have to be faithful as a husband, right? So it's not enough for Jonathan to believe, just assent to the fact that Mr. and Mrs. Khan are his parents, and then but not relate to them as their son. He's got to actually relate to them rightly. He's got to perform his obligations to them, right? He's got to obey their word, honor them. And same goes for me and my wife, right? I can't just say, oh, Emlyn, I believe that we are married, and then go and commit adultery and sleep with other women as if I do not already have a wife. So then, you see, to have faith means to relate to God as our covenant Lord, not just agree that He is our covenant Lord, not just say that He is our Lord, but to actually relate to him as our king, as our master. And here's where you need to assess yourself. Right now, if this is the Bible's definition of faith, can you really say to have had faith in God? Can you really say that you are someone who have faith in Jesus Christ as Lord? Because if you so confidently say that, yeah, I do, I believe, but as James says, even the demons believe and they shudder. What the Bible is saying is, do you have this faithfulness, obedience, integrity, trust, reliability, loyalty, fear? Does that describe your relationship with God and how you think of him? Now, besides us having to be faithful to God, God is also expected to be faithful and loyal to his covenant to us, right? So precisely because it's a covenant relationship, then that means there's obligations on both sides, right? And so what you see is that it's mutual faithfulness that is expected, okay, from God and also from us. Both have to relate to each other in faithfulness. And in fact, the fundamental reason for why Israel or God's people are expected to be faithful to God is because, firstly, he was faithful to them, right? And you know what, in the Old Testament, what this is referring to is primarily, firstly, God's past action in saving them. He redeemed them as slaves from Egypt, right? And precisely because he chose them and brought them out of Egypt and called them to be his people. That's why they are therefore to relate to him as his people. And same with all, you know, the other Perjanjians and in history as well, right? It all has to do with a historical act that has happened, you know, like maybe Siam, and therefore now they enter into this relationship, right? So mutual faithfulness is expected. Yeah. So to summarize, right, faith in the Old Testament is more than just believe in something or just believe that God is Lord, but it's in the context of covenant relationship, and therefore to have faith involves mutual faithfulness. Okay, and that means, right, the language of faith necessarily has a conditional tone, right? It's conditional. It's not, shall we say, unconditional, right? And yeah, there's a condition and criteria and standard to measure up to fulfill. And the problem is neither Israel nor Israel's king could meet that condition, right? In Nehemiah 9 verse 33, God himself pronounces to Israel, he says, you have been right, they talk about God, and Israel say, you have been righteous in all that has come upon us, for you have dealt faithfully and we have acted wickedly. See, God has been faithful, but the people are unfaithful. And it's not just in Nehemiah, you see it all around in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. Uh, on the eve of exile, right, the prophet Jeremiah proclaimed, he said, this is the nation that did not obey the voice of the Lord. Faithfulness, that word, right, emunah, has perished. It is cut off from their lips. In Deuteronomy also, right, very early in the story in Israel's history, Moses himself predicted that God would hide his face from them because they are a perverse generation, children in whom there is no faith, or rather faithfulness. Okay, so we see that what God expects of his people when he talks about having faith in him is he expects a faithfulness, a loyalty, a obedience that involves a complete and unswerving allegiance, complete loyalty, right? So faith needs to be understood in terms of faithfulness, that is of a wholeheartedness. That means not just, you know, a one-time thing or a part of your life. It involves your whole being, your whole heart, your loyalty, unswerving allegiance, expressed by observing and obeying the rules, the stipulations of God's covenant, right? In other words, keeping faith with God. Israel's covenant partner is at the heart of the Old Testament faith. When we talk about faith, we need to be thinking about keeping faith, not just having faith. The whole ethos, basically the whole essence of Deuteronomy reflects this idea of keeping faith with Yahweh. In their exhortations to choose Yahweh, to cling to Yahweh. Deuteronomy keeps repeating these phrases, right? Choose Yahweh, cling to Yahweh, love Yahweh, fear Yahweh, walk in all of Yahweh's ways, right? And to form no alliance with Canaanites and their gods. And it's not just an Old Testament thing. Look, Jesus is, if you think the Old Testament is intense and crazy, and then the New Testament is, reduced down, right? Jesus just says, have faith. No, Jesus doesn't just say, have faith. Jesus is in fact, shall we say, we are more exaggerated, right, in the language of devotion that he calls for. In Mark 8, Jesus says, right, if you want to have faith in me, is his definition of faith. If anyone would come after me, he doesn't just say the sinner's prayer, right? And yeah, it's done deal already. No, he says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. In other words, Jesus is saying, you want to follow me, you got to die. You got to die to everything that you are. You got to have complete allegiance to me alone and not at all you. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. You see, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? What can man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. And Jesus saying, absolute devotion, right? If you exchange your unswerving loyalty for me for anything, right? If you exchange all these things for the whole world, what do you gain? Because in the end, you will forfeit your soul. I mean, look at Luke 14. If you think that's crazy, Luke 14 is for Asians, right? Like, how can you even say such thing? Jesus says, you want to have faith? You want to follow me? Well, if anyone comes to me and you does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, and yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Look, Jesus doesn't say, if you don't hate these things, well, you are a third-class disciple, but you're still my disciple. Just not very high grade. No, Jesus straight up says, if you don't hate these things, you cannot be my disciple. Now, of course, don't get confused and think that what Jesus really wants is for you to actually hate your father. But the idea here is that in comparison to your love and your devotion to Jesus, how you feel towards your parents needs to be like as if you hate them. And in many ways, the call of discipleship, the call to be a Christian, actually involves making choices that your parents would interpret as you hating them. But Jesus says, yeah, you're going to prepare to be doing that. If you can't do that, you cannot be my disciple. If you don't bear your own cross and come after me, you cannot be my disciple. So you see, the idea of faith in the New Testament is not, again, just say a prayer in some concert and then call yourself a Christian. It's continuous, right? And it's pointless if you live like this for the first half of your life, and then the next half of your life you're like a chichai Christian. No, this faith got to be persevering till the end. And when we see this, right, when we see the demands of what God considers to be faith, we see how impossible it is, right? The impossibility of faithfulness, because we are sinful. And that's what you also see in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the impossibility of having this faithfulness. And therefore, right, there is a need for hope. Right? Hope is, I guess you could say, the more future aspect of a trust and reliance on God. Precisely because we can't rely on God, precisely because we have no ability to fully obey God and fully be devoted to Him. That's why we gotta hope in God to save us.